Hello, students, and welcome. Today we are going to be doing a little more March Madness. We're going to be introducing ourselves to semicolons and colons, and then we're going to start writing our argumentative essay. So let's dive right in. And let's take a look at our March Madness poetry. Now we've got a new QR code, and then I've also provided for you a link in your team's assignment, so you can use either one. I do recommend, if you have a phone, to scan the QR code and answer as we go through these. I'm going to read the poems to you individually and then give you a chance to reflect and vote. So today we're looking at tone. So we're working with our final 16 poems, our Sweet 16, and tone is the author's attitude toward a subject or how the author feels about who or what they're writing about. I have some examples of words that you might use to describe a poet's tone in a poem. So we've got admiring, angry, annoyed, cheerful, concerned, confident, disappointed, excited, fearful, passionate, frustrated, funny, gloom, honest, hopeful, or neutral, playful or proud, uncaring, questioning, reflective, sad, sarcastic, serious, unconcerned, uncertain, or uneasy. These are just some words that are tone words, but you can pull in any kind of words that you think of. Now, what we're going to do is I'm going to read the poems to you, and then you're going to listen for the tone that you hear. And what I want for us to do is take a second to kind of mentally portrait what we think that tone is, and then vote and reflect on the tone in your form. So go ahead and scan that QR code or bring up that document for us to vote with. And we have our matchup number 1. Hope is the Thing with Feathers by Emily Dickinson. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. And sweetest in the gale is heard, and sore must be the storm that could abash the little bird that kept so many warm. I've heard it in the chillest land and on the strangest sea, yet never in extremity it asked a crumb of me. So what tone do you hear happening in Hope is a Thing with Feathers? So we have, first of all, that tone hope, right? What kind of words do you think of when you associate with hope? What kind of things make you think of hope? So contemplate that a little bit. And then this one's up against The Moon by Robert Louis Stevenson. The moon has a face like a clock in the hall. She shines on thieves on the garden wall, on streets and fields and harbor quays, and birdies asleep in the forks of the trees. The squalling cat and the squeaking mouse, the howling dog on the door of the house, the bat that lies in bed at noon, all love to be out by the light of the moon. But all of the things that belong to the day cuddle to sleep to be out of her way, and flowers and children close their eyes till up in the morning the sun shall rise. So the tone here, let's look at it a little bit. It's a little bit more playful, right? It's a little bit more carefree. Hope is a Thing with Feathers is got a completely different tone than the moon. So what I want for you to do is I want for you to vote. And then based on the one that you vote for, I want for you to tell me what tone stuck out to you. What do you think the author's attitude is in Emily Dickinson's about hope? And what do you think that the author's attitude is about the moon? Go ahead and pause this video and go ahead and vote. Here are our tone words if you need them. We have our next matchup. The first is Nikki, Rosa by Nikki Giovanni. So I want you to listen. What do you think the author's attitude is in this poem about the subject? Childhood remembrances are always a drag if you're Black. You always remember things like living in Woodlawn with no inside toilet. And if you become famous or something, they never talk about how happy you were to have your mother all to yourself. and how good the water felt when you got your bath from one of those big tubs that folk in Chicago barbecue in. And somehow, when you talk about home, it never gets across how much you understood their feelings as the whole family attending meetings about Hollydale. And even though you remember, your biographers never understand your father's pain as he sells his stock and another dream goes. And though you're poor, it isn't poverty that concerns you. And though they fought a lot, it isn't your father's drinking that makes any difference, but only that everybody is together and you and your sister have happy birthdays and good Christmases. And I really do hope no white person ever has cause to write about me because they never understand Black love is Black wealth. And they'll probably ask about my hard childhood and never understand that all the while I was quite happy. So let's look at the tone in this poem. How does she feel, first of all, about white biographers or people who are looking into her life, people who are different from her? She's identifying as Black. She's explaining her past and her culture. And then she's saying that nobody's really going to understand that except for us, except for the people who are with me. So what is her tone? So think of a few tone words that you think about for that. And then we have this opposed to Nothing Gold Can Stay by Robert Frost. Nature's first green is gold, her hardest hue to hold. Her early leaf's a flower, but only so an hour. Then leaf subsides to leaf, so Eden sank to grief. So dawn goes down today, nothing gold can stay. So this poem's about the springtime and how short-lived. And I think we can see a really good example. You know, those big white puffy trees that bloom. Some of us think that they really smell bad when you start to smell their blossoms. But those started this week. They started on Monday, and you can already tell that some of them are already losing all of their flowers and becoming green because it's hard to hold on to that short-lived beauty, like the daffodils that are blooming in the lawns. Those are only going to last for a little short time. So it's saying nothing gold, nothing that is short-lived like this and so beautiful and so precious can stay forever. And there's a meaning behind that, right? Because it makes us treasure it all the more. So what is the author's tone about springtime and about the short-lived nature of springtime? We have these tone words that I want for you to look at and think, do any of these fit for any of the two poems? Okay. And then I want for you to go ahead and press pause on this video and vote for the either Nikki Giovanni or Nikki Rosa, sorry, by Nikki Giovanni, or Nothing Gold Can Stay. And then based on your winning poem, I want for you to articulate what you think was the tone of that winning poem. Our matchup number 3, the first one is Snowman by Gu Chang. I built a snowman at your front door to stand in my stead, waiting there in all its stupidity. Then you buried your lollipop deep into its snowy heart, saying this little sweetness would perk it up. The snowman did not smile, did not make a sound, and then the bright spring sun melted him away. Where is he now? Where is that candied heart? A bee buzzes beside the small puddles of tears. So this poem a lot reminds me of Nothing Gold Can Stay because it's about that short-lived time. And I think a really good life example is like how just a few weeks ago we had that snowstorm. We were out there building snowmen, and now all of a sudden it's spring and things definitely snow is not around at this point, right? We've got the buzzing things coming out. Bees are starting to come out and pollinate the flowers. So this is about that kind of short-lived time, but also we have some tension between the poet narrator, the poet speaker, that says how, hey, I built this snowman outside of your house. And instead of me standing there, I would have made it so that it could stand there. And you, instead of really appreciating my snowman, came out and just stuck a stucker in it. So this is kind of reflecting on, you do something for someone because you want to be close to them. And then what happens, that thing that you built to be close to them melts away and goes away and makes you wonder about the past and the future. So there's a little bit of a sad tone maybe to this poem. Maybe you read it differently. Now we have that opposed to The Summer I Was 16 by Geraldine Connolly. The turquoise pool rose up to meet us, its slide a silver afterthought down which we plunged, screaming, into a mirage of bubbles. We did not exist beyond the gaze of a boy. Shaking water off our limbs, we lifted up from ladder rungs across the fern-cool lip of rim. Afternoon. Oiled and sated, we sunbathed, rose and paraded the concrete, danced to the low beat of the Duke of Earl, past cherry colas, hot dogs, dreamsicles. We came to the counter where bees staggered into root beer cups and drowned. We gobbled cotton candy torches, sweet as furtive kisses, shared on benches beneath summer shadows, cherry, elm, sycamore. We spread our chenille blankets across grass, pressed radios to our ears, mouthing the old words, then loosened thin bikini straps and rubbed baby oil with iodine across sunburned shoulders, tossing a glance through the chain link at an improbable world. So this poem captures a moment in time about being 16 and that summertime feeling. So I want for you guys to think about last summer, right? Or maybe the summer before. Last summer, kind of a weird summer because of the pandemic. But I want you to think about a summer where everything is summer-like, right? You get to go to the pool, you get to hang out with your friends, all those little moments that kind of come together and really feel special. All right, so what is the tone that the author is communicating in the summer I was 16? I want you to think about these two. I want for you to pick your favorite and then think, what tone word would you use to describe what's going on and about the author's attitude about the subject? So how does the author feel about building that snowman and then having it melt? How does the author feel about that summer that they were 16 years old? So go ahead and press pause on this video and vote. All right, that brings us up to Mother to Son by Langston Hughes versus I Too by Langston Hughes. So 2 poems by Langston Hughes that are up against each other in matchup number 4. So our first one, well, son, I'll tell you, life for me ain't been no crystal stair. It's had tacks in it and splinters and boards torn up and places with no carpet on the floor, bare. But all the time I's have been climbing on and reaching landings and turning corners and sometimes going in the dark where there ain't been no light. So boy, don't you turn back. Don't you set down on the steps because you find it's kind of hard. Don't you fall now, for I's still going, honey. I's still climbing. And life for me ain't been no crystal stair. So the first thing that we have to think about in this poem is, what is a crystal stair? And to me, that is like a really easy path, a beautiful path, right? Sparkling, crystal, wonderful. And our poet speaker is a mother, and she's saying to her son, life really hasn't been that great for me, but I've never given up. I've never stopped moving forward. And I want for you to do that same thing. So what is the author's tone in Mother to Son? Now let's look at the opposite, I Too by Langston Hughes, where we have a poet speaker that's not a mother, right? That is a person that is talking about a life experience. So I too sing America. I am the darker brother. They send me to eat in the kitchen when company comes, but I laugh and eat well and grow strong. Tomorrow I'll be at the table when company comes. Nobody'll dare say to me, eat in the kitchen then. Besides, they'll see how beautiful I am and be ashamed. I too am America. So this poem is about being marginalized, right? Being someone who is not, who has been sent to the kitchen to eat alone and not in the public eye. And then is saying, you know, next time this comes around, this isn't going to happen because I'm going to sit at that table. This is the table where, a metaphorical table where I'm just as equal as everybody else. So what is the tone of this poem? How does this poem communicate a feeling or the author's attitude? Here are some possible words that could work for you, but if one of those don't work, then pull in another word. I want for you to take a second and vote between the 2 poems and then identify what you think the author's tone is on your winning poem. All right, our next two poems, Listening to Grown-Ups Quarreling by Ruth Whitman. Standing in the hall against the wall with my little brother, blown like leaves against the wall by their voices, my head like a ping pong ball between the paddles of their anger, I knew what it meant to tremble like a leaf. Cold with their wrath, I heard the claws of rain pounce. Floods poured through the city, skies clapped over me, and I was shaken like a mouse between their jaws. To me, this poem really captured what it's like to be a young child and hearing older people in an argument. Maybe they're having a heated exchange of words. Now, not all arguments are bad, and everybody fights sometimes. So I don't want you to think about this as necessarily an abusive situation. This is where we have kids standing in the hallway and they're hearing their parents argue. And that's really scary when you're young, right? Because you don't know what's going on and it's completely overwhelming. So I want for you to think about, what is the author's tone about hearing their parents argue while they're standing in the hallway? And then we have that up against Because I Could Not Stop for Death by Emily Dickinson. Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me, the carriage held but of ourselves and immortality. We slowly drove, he knew no haste, and I had put away my labor and my leisure too for his civility. We passed the school where children strove at recess in the ring. We passed the fields of gazing grain. We passed the setting sun, or rather, he passed us. The dews drew quivering and chill, for only gossamer my gown, my tippet only tulle. We passed before a house that seemed a swelling of the ground. The roof was scarcely visible, the cornice in the ground. Since then, 'tis centuries, and yet feels shorter than the day I first surmised the horses' heads were toward eternity, right? Okay, so this lady is saying, I was so busy in my life and so consumed with everything that was going on, I couldn't be bothered with the idea of death. I couldn't stop for death with everything that I was doing and how busy I was. So death came along, stopped their carriage, and let me come in. And when we did, we took a long ride and we looked at all the things happening around us and everything continuing on, even though our poet speaker, our narrator, is gone. So the tone here, what is the tone like? What is the tone saying? What is the author's attitude about death, about the process of death or the idea of death? An interesting fact is that Emily Dickinson, her window was right outside her family's burial ground. And so she kind of became a little bit fixated on the idea of death from an early age, and wrote about it a lot in her poetry. And so we kind of see some of her attitudes about death. So what are the poet speaker's attitudes about death? Here are some possible words that you could use as you're moving into vote. So go ahead and go to your voting window, vote for the poem that you like the best, and then tell me what you think the tone was, and press pause on this video while you're doing so. Our next matchup, My Shadow by Robert Louis Stevenson. I have a little shadow that goes in and out with me, and what can be the use of him is more than I can see. He is very, very like me from the heels up to the head, and I see him jump before me when I jump into my bed. The funniest thing about him is the way he likes to grow, not at all like proper children, which is always very slow, for he sometimes shoots up taller, like an India rubber ball, and he sometimes gets so little that there's none of him at all. He hasn't got a notion of how children ought to play and can only make a fool of me in every sort of way. He stays so close beside me, he's a coward, you can see. I think shame to stick to Nursey as that shadow sticks to me. One morning, very early before the sun was up, I rose and found the shining dew on every buttercup, but my lazy little shadow, like an errant sleepyhead, had stayed at home behind me and was fast asleep in bed. So this is a very playful poem. I would say that the tone to me is very playful and lighthearted. A child The poet speaker is a child thinking about the way that a shadow operates, and it follows us around and it does weird things in different light situation. And when there's no light outside shining, then we don't have a shadow. Now, that one's matched up with another very playful poem, Mr. Nobody by Anonymous. I know a funny little man as quiet as a mouse who does the mischief that is done in everybody's house. There's no one ever sees his face, and yet we all agree that every plate we break was cracked by Mr. Nobody. 'Tis he who always wears out books, who leaves the door ajar. He pulls the buttons from our shirts and scatters pens afar. That squeaking door will always squeak, for prithee, don't you see? We leave the oiling to be done by Mr. Nobody. He puts damp woods upon the fire that kettles cannot boil. His feet are the feet that bring in mud and all the carpet soil. The papers always are mislaid. Who had them last but he? There's no one tosses them about but Mr. Nobody. The finger marks upon the door by none of us are made. We leave the blinds unclosed to let the curtain fade. The ink we never spill, the boots that's lying around you see, are not our boots. They all belong to Mr. Nobody. This is another very playful poem, right? Thinking about how this reminds me of my daughter. Things will happen. I'll ask, who put these boots here? Who put your boots here? And she'll go, oh, I don't know who did that. So that's kind of the Mr. Nobody. So let's take a look at some tone ideas between those two. You might have another word that you want to use, and then I want for you to vote between those two and pick the tone word that you think fits the best for your poem. All right, we have matchup number 7. The first is We Wear the Mask by Paul Laurence Dunbar. We wear the mask that grins and lies, it hides our cheeks and shades our eyes. The debt we paid a human guile, with torn and bleeding hearts we smile, and mouth with myriad subtleties. Why should the world be overwise in counting all our tears and sighs? Nay, let them only see us while we wear the mask. We smile, but O great Christ, our cries to thee from tortured souls arise. We sing, but oh, the clay is vile beneath our feet and long the mile. But let the world dream otherwise. We wear the mask. So to me, this poem is about the idea of we have one face that we put out to the world. And sometimes that face is behind a mask, quite literally in the world we live in today, right? But I want you to think of kind of like a Halloween mask, something that completely covers up your face and lets you no one really knows what's going on behind the mask. So think about the kind of tone that you think about for We Wear the Mask. And that's against I Carry Your Heart With Me, I Carry It In by E.E. Cummings, which is one of my most favorite poems. In fact, both of these poems I love very much. I carry your heart with me. I carry it in my heart. I am never without it. Anywhere I go, you go, my dear, and whatever is done by me is your doing, my darling. I fear no fate, for you are my fate, my sweet. I want no world, for beautiful you are, my world, and true. It is you are whatever a moon has always meant, and whatever a sun will always sing is you. Here is the deepest secret nobody knows. Here is the root of the root and the bud of the bud and the sky of a tree called life, which grows higher than soul can hope or mind can hide. And this is the wonder that's keeping the stars apart. I carry your heart. I carry it in my heart. So this is a love poem, right? A very, very sweet love poem, and one that kind of talks about how no matter if we are apart, I still carry you with me, which is a very sweet sentiment, right? And it's saying it doesn't matter anything that's going on in the world because we have our love, and our love is the most important thing. So let's take a second to look at some tone words and think about the tone between the two poems. And then let's go ahead and vote. You may pause this if you need to vote and then to write your tone word. All right, that brings us to our last matchup, Hard Choices by Jojoba Mansell. A path is laid out ahead. It forks before your feet, a decision filled with dread, uncertain of what you'll meet. a game full of chance, of many hidden pitfalls. To find true romance, dare you risk losing all? Choice is never easy to make, fog seems to cloud your way. You fear making a mistake, of gambling and losing the day. But life is full of hard choices, and risk is part of the game. Be brave, ignore doubting voices, make the choice. Life won't be the same. All right, that poem to me is it's just about life. Like sometimes we have to make really hard choices between taking risks, hard choices between following our heart. So think about the tone that comes in there. What kind of tone do you think that the author has about hard choices? What is their attitude or feelings about it? And then that one's opposite The Rose That Grew from Concrete by Tupac Shakur. Did you hear about the rose that grew from a crack in the concrete? Proving nature's law is wrong, it learned to walk without having feet. Funny it seems, but by keeping its dreams, it learned to breathe fresh air. Long live the rose that grew from concrete when no one else ever cared. So this poem is a lot about hope, about how beautiful it can be to have something that comes up out of the concrete and grows. Kind of, it beats all odds, right? It's not exactly what we expect. So take a second to reflect on the tone there, and then do your voting for me. Okay. All right, now we're going to talk about colons and semicolons. We're learning about this particular area of punctuation. And so as a reminder, punctuation, when we talk, we naturally pause and speak with intonation to communicate effectively. But when we write, we need to use punctuation to show those pauses and intonations. So why is it important? It helps your writing flow. It increases the reader's comprehension. It improves readability. It provides pauses, and then it conveys messages correctly. So if you punctuate incorrectly, you might write something with an entirely different meaning, and we don't want to do that. So today we're talking about the colon, which the colon is a punctuation mark used to punctuate a major division in a sentence. And colon should always come after independent clauses. So remember that an independent clause is a complete sentence. It's got a subject, a verb, and a complete idea. So let's take a look at the different rules on where we can use colons. So you can use a colon to introduce a series of items, okay? So remember that the first part of the sentence needs to be a complete sentence to use a colon. I'm taking 3 classes, colon, geography, history, and philosophy. Don't capitalize the first item after a colon unless it's a proper noun. So like somebody's name or a city or something like that. So the correct form, the band toured in 3 cities, colon, Los Angeles, Pittsburgh, and Charlotte. The incorrect form is the band toured in Los Angeles, Pittsburgh, and Charlotte. So if you kind of look there, that the band toured is a complete sentence, right? We need to add those, in 3 cities. It gives us a clarification there, and then the 3 elements there. I went to the mall and purchased some new things. Here's the things I purchased. So I'm going to use a colon, a pair of shoes, a pair of pants, and a shirt. The incorrectly would be if you went to the mall and purchased colon. That's not going to work, right? I went to the mall and purchased. That's an incomplete sentence. All right, colon rule number 2. Use a colon to separate 2 clauses and to emphasize a phrase or single word at the end of a sentence. Only one word can describe this weekend, colon, amazing. Or that was the best roller coaster ever, colon, it was awesome. Another example here. Sorry, I didn't make this big. Let me. It was the best vacation ever, colon. They went to a fancy resort on a tropical island. Incorrect would be having a comma because the comma is just not strong enough there. So a lot of times I want to remind myself that like a colon is used to kind of set up an example, right? The only one word can describe the pizza we ordered last night, colon, amazing. So right here, I can't use a comma there because it's just not strong enough in terms of the type of grammar that I want to use. We can also use a colon to separate hours and minutes, like the recital will start at 3:45, or I woke up at 6:15 this morning. You can use a colon to show a ratio. The oil and water should be mixed at a 1:2 ratio, or mix the cinnamon and sugar at a 1:5 ratio. You can use the colon to set apart a quote from an independent clause. So my favorite quote is from William Shakespeare, colon, "To thine own self be true." Notice, the text before the colon is an independent clause or a complete sentence and can stand alone. So you're going to use a colon for the quote. See that colon right there before the quote. Rule number 5, Abraham Lincoln once said something that really resonated with me. Whatever you are, be a good one. So here's that example of kind of setting up that quote. Incorrect would be to just have it be Abraham Lincoln once said. All right, we need something that kind of ties those ideas together. You can use a colon after a formal salutation in a letter, for example, for to whom it may concern, or dear John Smith. So you see our colons there. All right, so here, where does the colon go? I need to go to the gas station. The tank is on empty. Now, your first instinct might be to use a comma there, but what we need to use is a colon because we're saying here is the example of why I need to go to the gas station. Annie's singing is stuck in my head. The sun will come out tomorrow. So we're setting up a quote here. So the colon is going to go after head. School is usually dismissed at 3:15 in the afternoon. We need that colon to designate time. The day cannot get any worse. It was just awful. Need that colon to describe how the day could not get any worse. All right, so that's our colon lesson. Next, we're going to talk about the semicolon, which is a punctuation mark used to separate major sentence elements. The semicolon has 3 uses and rules: to combine independent clauses, to combine independent clauses with a conjunctive adverb, or to separate items in an intricate list. So we can use the semicolon to connect 2 closely related independent clauses. So the key concept here is closely related independent clauses. Remember that an independent clause is a complete sentence, subject, verb, complete thought. So independent clause, semicolon, independent clause. Her sister is a competitive gymnast, semicolon. She won the silver medal in the meet. So those 2 sentences are related. They're close together. So we can put a semicolon there. Examples: the young toddler was crying in the store, semicolon, he was tired and hungry. A teacher handed out a pop quiz, semicolon, students were not ready for it. 5 jets looped in unison in the sky, semicolon, they were on an aerial stunt team. Just like every other day, the ferry left the clock at 7:30 in the evening, semicolon, it was very predictable, okay? So look at incorrect form down here would be just like every other day, semicolon, just like every other day isn't an independent clause, right? So we can't have the semicolon there. All right, rule number 2 is when you use a semicolon with a conjunctive adverb to connect 2 closely related independent clauses. Remember here, an independent clause is a complete sentence. So for our example is independent clause, semicolon, conjunctive adverb, comma, independent clause. So let's take a look at this example. Her sister is a competitive gymnast, semicolon. However, that's that conjunctive adverb. Remember, this is like however, therefore, more the less, moreover, in addition to, etc. Those are all conjunctive adverbs. She sprained her ankle and could not complete today. So we have a comma after that conjunctive adverb and then that other independent clause. I want to play soccer, semicolon. However, comma, I'm not athletic. Sam and Carla are studying for the ACT, semicolon, now our conjunctive adverb. Likewise, comma, Gina and Carlos are too. She forgot to put the milk away, semicolon. Therefore, comma, it went bad. All right, so take a look at some correct and incorrect examples. It's raining in Seattle, Washington, semicolon, whereas, the conjunctive adverb, comma, it's sunny in Newport Beach, California. It's raining in Seattle, Washington, whereas, so that semicolon can't come after the conjunctive adverb, right? That conjunctive adverb needs to have a semicolon before it. All right, and then the third rule is that we can use the semicolon to help separate items in an intricate list. Remember that an independent clause is a complete sentence. So item, comma, more details, semicolon, item, comma, more details, semicolon, and repeat. Her gymnast sister completed in Las Vegas, Nevada, semicolon, Tucson, Arizona, semicolon, and Bellevue, Washington. Now this one's a very complicated rule. So the first couple of times that you approach it, it might be a little confusing. So here we go with another example, is that there are a lot of doctors in my family, including my father, a pediatrician, semicolon, my mother, a neurosurgeon, semicolon, my aunt, comma, a cardiologist, semicolon, and my elder brother, an oncologist. I want to visit Lima, comma, Peru, semicolon, Paris, comma, France, semicolon, and Tokyo, Japan. So remember, this is a complex list. All right, take a look at this correct versus incorrect here. So where does the semicolon go? I like dogs, however, I hate the way they smell. So first of all, we need to notice that we've got a conjunctive adverb in this sentence, right? So I like dogs, the semicolon has to come before the conjunctive adverb, however. The barn is really small, only one tractor fits inside it. So we've got two related independent clauses here. So where does that semicolon go? There we go. My family is filled with artists. There is my sister, who is a pianist, my brother, who is a sculptor, and my mother, who is a painter. We've got a complex list here. So we're going to add those semicolons where we have the complex list. All right, now let's practice. You have two grammar worksheets that I've uploaded for you, and these are all about semicolon rules. So I want for you to go ahead and complete that first worksheet that I have uploaded for you today to review those rules. All right, so go ahead and upload a photo of that worksheet that you have completed. You should complete questions 1 through 6. We'll go over the answers in our next video. So now we're going to talk about our introduction and thesis statement to our argumentative essay that we're writing. And just as a reminder, here's the things that go into an essay. First, we've got the introduction that has your hook, your background information, and your thesis statement. That's what we're focusing on today. As a reminder, and body paragraphs, which we'll move on in our next lesson, which will have topic, sentence, examples, quotes, and evidence, explanations, and transitions. And then our conclusion, which will be a restatement of our thesis, the thesis evaluation, and then our final statement. So in our introduction, we start with a hook. A hook is an intriguing or shocking statement, an anecdote, which is a short little story, an analogy, a comparison between two things, or a quote that's going to grab your audience's attention. I want in this essay for you to avoid starting your essay with a question. Okay, so that's your special challenge, is not to start your essay with a question. After you have your hook, you're going to have background information. This is going to be several sentences of background information, and you're going to make that topic relevant for your audience. Never assume that they're knowledgeable about your topic. And then the thesis statement, and this is always going to go at the end of our introduction. So we're going to think about these in 3 different colors. When we write, we're going to have blue for the hook, purple for the background information, and green for your thesis statement. The thesis statement is a single sentence located at the end of the introduction that expresses the essay's main idea. I want you to kind of think about this as a blueprint for the essay. Not only will your thesis statement guide your writing, but it will also provide your audience with an idea of what to expect as they read. A good thesis statement will be a single declarative sentence. It will convey the main idea. It will provide focus by highlighting key points. It will establish our essay's purpose and include strong verbs and precise words. We want to make sure that we check off all of those boxes when we're creating a thesis statement. A poor thesis statement will be vague and include vague words. It'll not include a claim. It will only restate conventional wisdom or things that we already know. It'll be too broad or include generalizations. It'll include the phrases like this paper will be about, or in this essay I will write about. So when we talk about being vague and using vague words like good or bad or very or really vague, and they're going to weaken your thesis statement. Instead, I want for you to include precise words and strong verbs. And then a bad thesis statement isn't going to include a claim. So don't completely just state a topic and link it to your paper. For example, this paper will be about the importance of drinking water. Instead, include a claim that will be debated. Avoid restating only conventional wisdom. So writing common knowledge and cliches. For example, it's important to drink water. Instead, add more depth to the topic by providing a unique perspective, yours. Or a bad thesis statement will be too broad or include generalizations. For example, Romeo and Juliet is a play about a tragedy, or every college freshman is overwhelmed. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to work on brainstorming some ideas for our thesis. We're going to write a declarative statement that answers a question generated from the prompt, write our key points, and combine our statement and key points. So I want to show you some examples of some bad thesis, some poor thesis statements, and I want for us to think about how would we revise these. So example 1, this paper will examine and explain what makes a good leader. Example 2, high school has very many important parts. One is learning from your mistakes. Or when experiencing a drought, it's important to conserve water. So a lot of these are offering generalizations. They're not very specific. They're not really taking a state that I can argue with you about, right? So our topic is, should TV shows be taught in the English classes as literature, and why or why not? So using our document that I provided in Teams, I want for you to work on developing your thesis. So our topic, should TV shows be taught in English classes as literature? Why or why not? The first one is our hook or attention grabber. So remember that that's a shocking statement, anecdote, or analogy or quote that's going to grab our reader's attention. Avoid starting our essay with a question. And then what's our background information? We want to have several sentences of background information and make it topic relevant to our audience. I want for you to use this article, Can Television Be Considered Literature and Taught in English Classes? I'm going to upload that into Teams. You should have already completed this assignment in Common Lit or downloaded a hard copy. I want you to pull from this for your background information. And then I want for you to work on your thesis. So always place this statement at the end of your introduction. And then we're going to pull it all together by writing your simple introduction here. And we're going to highlight things in specific colors. So when you write it out, I want for the hook or attention grabber to be in blue. I want the background information to be in purple. And then I want for the thesis information to be in green, okay? So when we're typing that, so we can put it all together and write our sample introduction here. We're gonna get started on that, and then you're gonna have time to finish that on class and Monday and Tuesday. So this will be due at the very latest next Tuesday. All right, thank you so much for your time today, and I look forward to reading your ideas.